He told me, "Just wait outside for a moment, Mom. We're not ready yet." So I stood there, clutching my homemade apple pie on the concrete step beside their door. The porch light was off, and as it got darker, the November wind slipped through my coat like water through a sieve. I held the pie tighter, still warm, feeling it through the towel wrapped around the dish. My fingers ached from the cold. I waited, and through the window I saw them. Laughter, the sound of forks clinking against plates already filled. Lauren was passing a bowl of salad to Emma, my granddaughter, while Paul poured wine. The candles on the table flickered with a golden glow. They were all there except for me. I didn't drop the pie, didn't knock, didn't call his name. I turned around, descended the steps slowly, and walked to the curb. I didn't cry, not then. My eyes just burned, the kind of burn from staring at something too long and hard. I drove home in silence, the road familiar. I had lived in this neighborhood for 42 years. Every turn was instinctual. Paul had been born in this house, learned to ride his bike on Sycamore Street, and built a treehouse in our backyard, though that tree had been cut down years ago. I parked in front of the house. It seemed smaller now, as if each year without George had taken away some of its strength. The porch steps sagged slightly, and a gutter was hanging loose again. I had asked Paul to help fix it last spring, and he had said, "Sure, next weekend." 8 months ago, the house was filled with the scent of cinnamon and aged wood. I placed the pie on the counter. The towel was damp from steam as I carefully unwrapped it like a bandage and set it on the stove. It was a good pie, perhaps my best in months. I stood still in the kitchen, enveloped by the silence. Slowly I moved to the hallway, removing my coat with trembling hands, not from the cold, but from the realization that he hadn't forgotten. It wasn't a mistake, and I hadn't misheard. He had told me to wait outside because he didn't want me inside. I sat in the living room, sinking into the familiar beige armchair where George used to doze off during football games. Leaning my head back, I stared at the ceiling, haunted by the question, why would my own son ask me to wait outside while celebrating with his family? Why hide me? I had raised him alone after George passed, paid for his education, skipped meals so he could attend a summer science program, and even sold my wedding ring to help with his first car's down payment. He never knew that part. When he met Lauren, I supported them with their mortgage, wedding, and the baby's crib. And now this. I got up, approached the side table, and opened the drawer. An old scratch phone lay there. I scrolled to Paul's name and stared, unable to call. What would I say? Why didn't you let me in, son? And what if he replied, "It wasn't personal, Mom." Or worse, "We thought you'd be uncomfortable."
It felt as though my presence was a problem to be dealt with. I opened the bottom drawer where I stored receipts and records, uncertain of what I hoped to find. Perhaps evidence of my involvement in their lives. Bank transfers, notes from Lauren, little drawings from Emma, anything to ground me. What I uncovered was the receipt for their roof repair, $5,000 paid entirely by me, along with a thank you text from Paul. "You're a lifesaver, Mom. Don't know what we'd do without you." That was 3 years ago. I leaned against the drawer, breathing slowly. No, tonight wasn't an accident. They were ready. Just not for me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I remained in the same chair until morning, watching shadows dance across the floor. By 40 a.m., I got up and placed the pie in the fridge. By 6, I had boiled water, made tea, and fed the cat, even though he hadn't meowed yet. My hands needed to stay busy. By 8 I had a plan. I started with the messages. My son never deletes anything, and neither do I. I took out my phone and checked our last thread. The invite had been casual. Dinner's at 6, just come by the house. Bring pie if you want. No mention of a party, no talk of guests. Certainly nothing about a reservation list or a table set for 10 without me. I scrolled back further, through weeks and then months, noticing little patterns, requests, favors.
Mom, can you drop off the kids on Tuesday? Mom, we're short on rent this month. Just $100, I swear. Could you drive Lauren to the dentist? Always polite, always thankful, but always one-sided. I never asked for anything, not once. The last time Paul visited without needing something was for Emma's 2nd birthday. He brought balloons and a crayon drawing she made of Grandma's house. That drawing used to be on my fridge, but the colors faded, and it fell off one day. I didn't bother to put it back. I closed the messages and gazed at my reflection in the dark screen, noticing my face looked older than it had just a week ago. Amazing how one night can change that. Later that morning, I called Lauren to check if perhaps Paul had deviated from the plan, and she wasn't aware. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, sounding surprised. "Oh, hi, Mary." "Good morning, Lauren. Just checking in. I stopped by last night," I replied. There was an awkward pause, and I could hear the coffee machine humming in the background. "Oh, yeah. Paul mentioned you stopped by. Sorry about that. Things were hectic," she said. I didn't respond, so she continued. "We just had a few friends over, nothing extravagant." "Looked nice through the window," I said flatly. She laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess it got a bit festive." "I saw everyone," I added. "Emma, the Petersons, your sister, the wine, the cake, all 10 of you." Silence followed. Then she said, "It wasn't personal, Mary. We thought it might be better if—" "Better for who?" I questioned. Not angry, just curious. She sighed. "Paul didn't want to overwhelm you. He mentioned you've been tired lately. Your knees—" "My knees are fine," I interrupted. I heard her swallow. "Look, I'm really sorry," she said, but I hung up before she could continue. The phone rang almost immediately, but I didn't answer, not this time. Instead, I went to the kitchen and pulled out a notebook, the blue one with the worn edges. I've used it for years to track bills, medications, birthdays, but that morning I used it for something else. I listed every dollar I'd given Paul over the past decade, starting with the house when they were short for the down payment, taking from George's life insurance, then the car when Lauren's broke down, Emma's braces, the school fundraiser, the broken furnace, the trip to Tahoe, the new mattress, the emergency vet bill. The list spanned 6 pages. I carefully added it up twice, $74,380. I underlined the total and shut the book. I wasn't angry, not yet, just aware. People take what you offer. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's just habit. But when you stop giving, you learn what they truly think of you. That day had arrived. I spent the next day in silence, not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that drapes a house when each room harbors a question you'd rather not face. I avoided turning on the radio or checking the mail. I moved slowly from room to room, observing things I'd previously missed. the crack in the hallway tile, the slightly crooked picture frames, the armrest of George's recliner, worn smooth from years of use. That chair had remained empty since his passing. I intended to give it away, but something held me back. It was the last piece of him in the house. By mid-morning, I called my bank. "Good morning. This is Chase National," greeted the young woman, too cheerful for my mood. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to cancel the automatic transfers on my account." "All of them?" she asked, pausing. "Yes, all of them, the ones marked to Paul G. and Lauren T. Thornley." She requested my verification details, which I provided, then waited as she navigated her screens. "I see 4 recurring transfers," she noted. 1 for mortgage assistance, 1 for private school tuition, and 2 for miscellaneous payments. "I want them all stopped," I insisted, "immediately, and I want a printed statement of the last 3 years mailed to me." Another pause. "Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else I can do for you today?" "No," I replied. "You've done more than enough." I hung up, my hands trembling, not from doubt, but from adrenaline.
I went into my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept old documents. The manila envelopes labeled legal, insurance, wills. I hadn't looked at George's will in years. He had made it straightforward, leaving everything to me. "I trust your judgment, Mary," he had said softly, but with certainty. "You'll know what to do when the time comes."
At that time, I believed he was referring to practical matters like taxes, plumbing, and property. But now I realized he was talking about the challenging things that can't be solved with a wrench or a checkbook. I set aside the will and pulled out my own, which was outdated, last updated in 2009. It named Paul as the main executor and beneficiary, with Emma mentioned only in a minor clause, and Lauren not included at all. Back then, I thought this arrangement was generous and straightforward, but now it seemed careless. I contacted Mr. Langston, my attorney. "Mary, it's been a while," he said. "Yes," I replied, "but I think it's time we made some updates." He didn't ask questions, just scheduled an appointment for Monday morning. I hung up and took a deep breath for the first time in 2 days. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. I didn't check the caller ID. I knew who it was. "Mom," Paul said, trying to sound nonchalant. "I heard you talk to Lauren." "Yes, she's upset." "I imagine she is." There was silence on the line. Then, "You're not answering your messages." I didn't think there was anything left to say. He sighed. "Look, I know it didn't look good, but we weren't trying to hurt you. You just didn't want me there. That's not fair. You told me to wait outside." He paused. "You came too early." "Paul," I said, my voice calm. There was a toast, candles, and the cake was already cut. More silence followed. I waited. He didn't refute it.
"You could have just told me, I said, that you didn't want me there, that I wasn't part of the celebration." "That's not what it was," he insisted, but his words lacked conviction. "It was complicated. You've been tired. You mentioned your hip was bothering you. We didn't want to stress you." I didn't respond. Finally, he added, "We were planning to visit this weekend, bring you leftovers." Emma made a card. A pause ensued. He was waiting for gratitude, forgiveness, for me to say, "That's sweet of her."
I didn't say, "Don't bother," but quietly remarked that I had already cleaned out the fridge. Hanging up felt like severing a rope I'd been holding onto for years, one that had been suffocating me without my knowing. The office smelled of lemon polish and old books. Mr. Langston hadn't changed much. His hair was thinner, his belly slightly rounder, but his eyes remained as sharp as ever. When he stood to greet me, he did so with a formality rarely seen nowadays, as though my presence truly mattered. "Mary," he said warmly, "it's good to see you." "And you," I replied sincerely. He motioned for me to sit and then closed the door, ensuring no interruptions. That was something I appreciated about him, making time regardless of the issue's scale. I handed him my old will, explaining it needed revising. He took it without a word, slipping on his glasses and skimming through it. Then, peering over the frames, he asked, "Do you know what changes you want?" "I want Paul removed as the executor," I stated. "And beneficiary?" He nodded slowly, understanding. "Do you wish to name someone else?" "My granddaughter Emma," I said. "She's young, but I trust her more than her parents." He didn't blink, simply reached for a clean sheet of paper and began writing. "And the house?" "It stays in a trust in my name, with no transfers, no co-signing, no power of attorney." His pen moved across the paper like issuing a verdict. "And the savings? I'd like to create a small scholarship fund in George's name for local students, especially those with single mothers." He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "That's generous." "It's justice," I replied. "George believed in hard work, as do I. It shouldn't go to those who only think of me when their car breaks down." He smiled faintly, and I felt the warmth of being understood. It took over an hour to finalize everything, as he carefully guided me through the paperwork, ensuring I comprehended every clause. When I signed the last document, he slipped it into a folder and said, "You've just drawn a new line, Mary." "Feels good, doesn't it?" he asked. I nodded. It doesn't hurt. Leaving his office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the pavement. I stopped by the bakery on my way home, not out of routine, but because I wanted to. I bought a single slice of cherry pie, George's favorite. Back home, I sat on the porch and ate it with a plastic fork. The air was cold, but refreshing. I watched the neighborhood, the dogs barking, kids returning from school, the mailman waving as he passed by. For the first time in a long while, the house felt like mine, not something I was keeping for others, not a repository for their memories, but truly mine. That evening, I turned off my phone, letting them wonder. The first call came on Tuesday evening from a number I didn't recognize, but I answered out of habit. "Mom, Paul." His voice was tense, like someone trying to sound calm with clenched fists. "I heard you change your will." "I did," I replied simply. A pause. "Without telling me?" "It's my will, Paul. I don't need permission." Silence followed by a sigh, not of sadness, but calculation. "Look," he said, "if this is about Friday." "It's not just about Friday." He hesitated. "You're upset. That's understandable, but maybe we should talk before making rash decisions." "I didn't make any rash decisions," I said evenly. "They've been years in the making. I just finally acted." Another pause. "You're being dramatic." That made me laugh. Not loudly, not humorously, just a dry, quiet chuckle. "No, Paul. Dramatic would have been me showing up at your dinner party and flipping the cake onto the carpet. I sat outside your house holding a pie I made for your family while you raised a glass without me. That's not drama. That's clarity. His tone softened. You know we love you. I don't know that, I said. I know you love what I provide. The line went quiet again. Emma was really upset when she heard, he said finally, as if playing a trump card. She's the only one who isn't cut out of anything, I said. Maybe ask her. I hung up before he could say more. I wasn't in the mood for explanations that led to guilt. An hour later, Lauren texted, "You're punishing us. That's not fair." I didn't respond. Fair was co-signing a loan for their failed business idea within 6 months. Fair was enduring 3 Christmas dinners where I couldn't mention George because it made things too heavy. Fair ran out of steam a long time ago. The next day, Thea, my neighbor's daughter, came over with some tomatoes from their garden. We sat on the porch, sipping tea. She's in her 20s, still figuring life out, but there's something stabilizing about her presence. She listens intently. "Can I ask you something?" she said, clasping her mug. "What made you do it? Change everything now?" I pondered for a moment before replying. "There's a line between love and usefulness," I said, "and when you start feeling like a tool, not a person, it's time to reassess." She nodded slowly. "Sounds lonely." "Sometimes it is," I admitted, "but being surrounded by people who only value you for what you provide is even lonelier." She was silent for a while, then said, "My mom always says dignity isn't loud. It just doesn't bend." I smiled, acknowledging she was right. That evening, I discovered Emma's card in the mailbox. No return address, just her handwriting. Inside was a drawing, a small house with flowers, a bright sun, and an elderly woman with gray hair sitting on the porch, a pie on her lap. Beneath, in her teenage cursive, it read, "I saw you, Grandma. I wanted you there." No apology, no request, just presence. I held the card to my chest and exhaled. Monday morning arrived with rain. The sky was low and gloomy, and the gutters overflowed once more, the same ones Paul never fixed. I took my time, making tea, buttering some toast, and feeding Jasper the cat. I wasn't going to rush into this new phase. I had spent too long hurrying to satisfy others. By 10, I was in Mr. Langston's office, reviewing the final documents. He meticulously explained each clause as if I were a novice, rather than a woman who had settled 3 mortgages in her life. "The trust is now active," he stated, tapping the folder. "Everything, house, savings, even your jewelry, remains under your name, with clear instructions on succession. No changes can be made without your consent or a court order, and Emma is designated as the successor trustee." I nodded, hands folded in my lap. "If anyone pressures you to alter it, contact me any time," he urged. "I will," I replied, "and the medical directive is signed." If I'm unable to make my own decisions, Emma decides. Not Paul, not Lauren. He regarded me with a mix of concern and admiration. "You're handling this with a steady hand, Mary. No anger, just clarity." "I'm too old for tantrums," I said, "but not too old for dignity." On my way home, I stopped by the library. It was mostly empty, except for high school students dragging their feet through history projects, and a few retirees dozing in the armchairs. I wasn't there for books this time. Emma was working at the front desk, her part-time job. I waited until the line dwindled, then approached. She saw me and smiled broadly, genuinely. "Grandma, I got your card," I said. "Thank you." She appeared embarrassed, lowering her voice. Dad was upset that I sent it. I know, but I didn't agree with their actions, and I told them. Mom said, I didn't understand the broader perspective, but sometimes I think the broader perspective is just people being afraid. I smiled, noting that she saw more than they realized. We chatted for a bit about school, her biology teacher, and the book she was secretly taking from the band shelf. Then she leaned in and quietly asked, Are you okay? I looked at her, really looked. She had George's eyes, not just their color, but the calm way they focused on you when you spoke. I am now, I replied. She nodded, grasping something deeper than I could express. If you ever need anything, really anything, call me first, she said. Before Dad, I will. Before leaving, I discreetly placed a small envelope in her hand. Inside was a note. You are the only one I trust to hold the key. One day, this house will be yours, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. She read it at the counter, her eyes welling up, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded. Okay, she whispered. When I stepped back into the rain, it didn't seem as heavy. Emma came by that Saturday with a bag of groceries, unannounced. She just appeared, her hoodie drenched from the rain, hair pulled into a messy bun. When I opened the door, she lifted the bag like it was an offering. Grandma, she said, you didn't have milk, and I know you dislike going out when it's wet. I let her in silently. Some things don't need immediate thanks. We put the groceries away together, without speaking. She knew where everything belonged, which said a lot. She had been observing, paying attention. Once the kitchen was quiet, she sat at the table and gazed at me intently. Can I ask you something? She said. I nodded. Why now? Her tone was curious, not demanding. Why not 5 or 10 years ago? I sat across from her, folding my hands. Because I still believed I mattered to them, that one day they'd see me again, not just as an obligation or a resource, but as a person, a mother. She was silent for a moment, then said, I think they do see you, but only as someone who's always been dependable, always there, always fixing things. It's hard to picture you doing anything else. That's the problem, I replied. They don't imagine, they just expect. Emma bit her lip, thinking. I remember once asking Dad where your bedroom was in our old house, and he laughed, saying, wherever the bills are kept. I didn't understand then, but I do now. That hurt more than I anticipated, not because it was harsh, but because it sounded so offhand, as if that's all I was to him, a ledger, a line of credit. Do you think I did something wrong? I asked her quietly. She shook her head. I think you did too much right for too long. They forgot you could say no. I looked at her, this young woman with keen eyes and a big heart. She wasn't here out of obligation. She was here because she chose to be. I want you to promise me something, I said. Anything. When I'm gone, no guilt, no rewriting. You'll tell the truth about what happened, about who came and who didn't, about how I chose to live the end of my life. Emma reached over the table and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were chilled from the rain, yet her grip was firm. I promise, she said. We sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, the hallway clock ticking softly. Jasper padded in and curled up at Emma's feet, sensing the gentle moment. As she left, I stood by the window and watched her walk to her car. She didn't glance back, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't need to. She knew I was there, always, by choice rather than habit. That night I slept soundly for the first time in weeks and woke early the next morning, well before sunrise. It wasn't pain or dreams that woke me, but a kind of alertness I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet, yet not empty, breathing with me. I made oatmeal just the way George liked it, plain, without sugar. Sitting at the table, spoon in hand, my mind wandered. It's odd what memories linger. I recalled a day from decades ago, perhaps 1976. George had just repaired the old Chevy, and Paul, at 5, sat cross-legged on the lawn with a popsicle. We'd just bought our first real washing machine. I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window, thinking, this is it. This is life. It wasn't grand or dramatic, just good and honest, earned through small sacrifices and long days. I was proud of that and still am. But somewhere along the way, I ceased to be a woman and became a service, a chauffeur, a babysitter, a checkbook with an apron. I say this not with bitterness, just as a fact. They never asked who I wanted to become once my necessity faded, nor did they wonder what I missed, dreamed about, or if I felt lonely in a house that once echoed with laughter. Paul never inquired about how I slept after George passed, or whether the silence in the bedroom felt like mercy or punishment. He didn't ask what happened to my wedding ring when the bills piled up with no one left to help. I quietly sold it to a pawn shop on 8th Street, receiving $200 and a knowing look from the man there. Do not forget, it wasn't pity or kindness, merely indifference, that allowed the ring to pay for Paul's textbooks during his first semester. He never found out, and I don't share this to embarrass him, but to show that I played my role. I gave, I supported, I remained silent so they could express themselves. Now, I'm quiet by choice. After breakfast, I strolled to the garden. The roses were mostly gone, but the lavender still held on. I knelt down, gently pulling a stubborn weed, reflecting on the women I knew growing up, my mother, her sisters, and the neighbor who made apple jelly and had 3 husbands, all buried in the same graveyard. These women never complained. They endured with straight backs and few words. But now, I wonder how many passed away with stories untold. I refused to be one of them. Later, I discovered an old box in the attic. Inside were photos, letters, some of George's cufflinks, and a small notebook, mine from before Paul was born. I opened it carefully, like a letter from a forgotten correspondent. Page after page, I found a woman with ambitions, a list of cities to visit, recipes to try, poems copied by hand, even a garden sketch with benches drawn in wobbly pencil. I had forgotten her. She wasn't practical or patient, but she was vibrant. I closed the notebook gently, taking it downstairs to place beside the teapot. I think I'll plant new lavender next spring. Perhaps paint the porch just for my own enjoyment. It was a Thursday when Paul arrived. No call or text, just his car rolling into the driveway, as it always did. But this time, I didn't feel the usual mix of hope and dread. I felt prepared. From the kitchen window, I watched as he sat there for a moment, engine running, eyes fixed ahead. Then he stepped out, like someone braving uncertain weather, holding something in his hands, a folder thick with papers. He knocked politely, and I opened the door without stepping aside. "Hi, Mom," he greeted. "Paul." He paused before lifting the folder and asking, "Can we talk?" I studied him for a moment before stepping back. 10 minutes, I said, not because I owe you, but because I'm not scared of you. He entered the room cautiously, as if stepping into unfamiliar territory, his eyes scanning for any signs of comfort or absence. He took a seat at the table while I remained standing. I just wanted to clear a few things up, he started. I think this has spiraled out of control. No, I replied, it's finally under control. Mine. He looked hurt, but quickly regained his composure, always possessing that lawyer-like demeanor, logical and persuasive, even as a child. We never intended to exclude you. That dinner wasn't a statement. It was just last minute, he explained. I stayed silent. And Lauren, she feels awful. She's been crying, actually. Let her cry, I said quietly. She's good at it. He blinked. You're being cold. No, I replied. I'm just being accurate. He opened the folder, spreading out papers, bank statements, schedules, an old print of my will. I know you've made some changes, and that's your right, but perhaps we acted too hastily. We don't need to be punitive. We can discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, I said. I've been talking for 30 years, but you never listened. He frowned. What are you trying to prove? That I'm still here, I replied. That I see reality and won't spend my final years waiting outside like a delivery. He appeared genuinely hurt, but it didn't soften me. Rather, it showed he still didn't understand. I've given you everything, I said. Not just money, time, silence, my reputation when you needed a cosigner, my Sundays when you needed a sitter, my pride when you needed help but couldn't ask. He rubbed his face, his eyes suddenly looking older than I remembered. So that's it, he said. You're cutting us off? No, I replied. I'm setting myself free. He glanced down at the folder, then slowly and awkwardly gathered the papers back inside. You always claimed family was everything, he murmured. And I meant it, I replied, but not at the expense of myself. He stood there, folder tucked under one arm. I wish you'd told me sooner, he said. I did, I answered. You just couldn't hear it over the noise of your own desires. He didn't hug me, didn't shed a tear, didn't even say goodbye. He simply walked away, and for the first time in ages, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt like I had chosen myself. 2 days later, I had lunch with Lorraine. We'd been friends since the 70s, when we both had toddlers and hips that didn't ache whenever it rained. She still lived 3 streets over in the same red brick bungalow with green shutters and wind chimes that never stopped singing, even in still air. She brought soup, and I made sandwiches. We sat in the sunroom with blankets over our knees like 2 old women do, discussing the edges of what truly mattered until we didn't. I heard Paul visited, she mentioned without looking at me. He did, I confirmed. She sipped her tea. I let him talk, I said, but I didn't let him change anything. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Good, she responded. She didn't ask for more details. She didn't need them. We were the kind of friends who understood each other's silences better than others' explanations. I always wondered, she said softly, if we did it wrong with this generation, if we made them too comfortable, too certain we'd always be there. I glanced at her, surprised. Lorraine hadn't spoken like that in years, not since her son placed her in assisted care for 2 months without asking, just because his new wife needed space. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. You just lived fully, and so did I. She nodded, her eyes misting. It still hurts, though, doesn't it? She asked. Yes, I replied, but not like before. It's not a wound anymore, just a scar, reminding me where not to lean. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind chimes and the ticking clock. Then she said, "You know what's crazy? They think we're fragile, but we're the ones who survived it all." I smiled. We are the storm, not the roof. She laughed with a rich, comforting sound, and for a moment it was as if we were 30 again, enjoying crackers on the back porch, shooing away toddlers and mosquitoes. Before she left, she touched my hand and said, "I'm proud of you." I didn't say thank you. I simply squeezed her fingers, which was enough. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the sky turn lavender, reflecting on all I had given away freely and what I was finally learning to hold on to. Time, peace, my own story. They might not hear it or like it, but it would be mine. As dusk approached, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I had just poured a cup of chamomile tea and settled down with an old blanket and a mystery novel I had read 3 times before. I moved slowly to answer, not with dread, but with a calm resignation, knowing Paul would be there. His jacket was unzipped, eyes shadowed, looking thinner or perhaps just tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I examined his face. There was no folder in his hands this time, no arguments ready. "All right," I said, but just for a moment. He entered quietly, as if stepping into a hospital room, his eyes wandering to the framed photo of George on the hallway table, then to the kitchen, where everything appeared unchanged, yet everything felt different. We sat in the living room, him on the edge of the couch, me in my chair, maintaining a careful distance. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "That's good," I replied. "I'm all out of reasons, too." He nodded slowly, running a hand through his hair. "We're in trouble," he said. I remained silent. "The business is collapsing. Lauren's cousin withdrew the funding, and we're months behind. There's a lot of debt." Still, I stayed quiet. He was gauging the situation, looking for a hint of sympathy. "The mortgage," he continued. "We refinanced last year, but we didn't tell you. It's worse now. If we lose the house—" His voice faltered, filled with shame rather than drama. "We'll have nowhere to go." I sipped my tea, now cold. "Why are you telling me this, Paul?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Because I don't know who else to tell." I waited as he swallowed. "I know we've made mistakes. I know I have. I know we took advantage of your kindness. I just—" He paused, struggling with the words. He had spent too long relying on charm over honesty. "I thought you'd always be there," he finally said. "And then you weren't." I looked at him. This man I had raised. The boy I once wrapped in towels after bath time, whose fevered forehead I once pressed against my cheek. "I was always there," I said, "even when I shouldn't have been. And now I'm here, just not for your version of me." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I will listen, I will care, but I will not pay, not anymore." He looked down at his hands, gripping his knees. "But what do we do?" he asked, sounding small for the first time in years. "You figure it out," I said, "like I did, like millions do." "You don't need saving, Paul. You need to change." A long silence settled between us. "I was afraid to come," he said. "I believe that. I thought you'd slam the door in my face. I thought about it." He let out a small, brittle laugh. "Emma said you wouldn't." My heart stirred at her name. Emma sees more than either of us. He nodded. She told me she's using her next paycheck to fix the gutter here. Said it's not right for you to climb a ladder. She's already more of a daughter than I ever had a son. I said, not bitterly, just truthfully. He winced but didn't argue. I'll go, he said, standing. I just wanted to tell you I'm not okay. I stood up and walked him to the door. When his hand touched the knob, I quietly said, Paul. He turned around. You don't have to be perfect, just honest, I added. He nodded, didn't say goodbye, and left. I watched him walk to his car. He moved like someone who had finally stopped pretending. I stayed in the kitchen long after he'd gone, the tea cold, the clock softly ticking away, time I wasn't spending chasing anyone. I looked at the chair where Paul had sat, his shoulders slumped, his voice lacking charm, and I felt something unexpected, not anger or triumph, but grief, not for what I'd lost, but for what never really existed as I imagined it, for the fantasy I'd created of a son returning with gratitude, not debt and apology. Letting that go was a quiet but profound ache. I stood, poured the tea down the sink, and went to the back porch. The sky was darkening, likely rain again. I pulled my cardigan closer and sat down, staring at the half-dead lavender and the empty bird feeder. Then I thought of the bank account, enough to help them, not save them, but enough to buy time, maybe prevent foreclosure or keep the lights on while they sorted things out. My fingers reached for the checkbook, then stopped. I sat with that urge, the reflex to fix, soothe, rescue, observing it like an untrusted guest. How many times had I done this, paid not from belief in their choices, but from my inability to bear their fear? I'd mistaken guilt for generosity, fear of being excluded for love. No more. I stood, returned inside, opened the drawer where the checkbook was, then closed it. Instead, I wrote a letter to Paul. I believe you when you say things are tough. I believe you didn't come for money, not just that anyway. And I want to believe this is the beginning of something better, but I need you to do it yourself, the kind of work that doesn't come with a paycheck. I've loved you immeasurably and still do, but that love won't be a sacrifice anymore. You're not alone, but you are accountable. That's what being an adult means. I've given you the opportunity to stand on your own 2 feet. Take it. Mom, I sealed the envelope and left it on the table. I planned to give it to Emma next time she visited, trusting her to choose the right moment to deliver it. That night, I slept with the windows open. The wind was strong yet gentle, flowing through the house as if it were being refreshed. For once, I didn't worry about who might need me the next day. I finally remembered what I needed for myself. 3 days later, an invitation arrived, a cream envelope nestled in the mailbox as if it belonged. There was no stamp, no address, just my name in Paul's careful handwriting. Inside was a single card. Dinner, Saturday, 6 p.m. Just us, no guests, no surprises. They wanted to try again, Paul and Lauren. No explanation, no guilt, no demands, just a quiet invitation disguised as paper. I placed the card on the table and stared at it for a while, thinking about the last time I stood at their door, pie in hand, with warm light from the windows, full of people I once considered mine, and laughter I wasn't part of. What I felt now wasn't fear, but clarity. So I called Emma. She answered on the second ring. Hey, Grandma, I got an invitation. A pause. I thought they might reach out. It's different this time. Is it? I'm going, I said, but on one condition. Name it. You drive me and walk me to the door. She didn't hesitate. Done. Saturday arrived softly and gray. Emma came early, wearing a simple dress and no makeup, just steady, clear eyes. The car ride was quiet but not burdensome. When we pulled into Paul's driveway, I saw the porch light was already on, curtains drawn back, and the door slightly open. We stepped out together onto the steps. I touched Emma's arm, signaling to wait. She nodded, hands clasped in front of her, like someone poised to speak at a memorial. I ascended the steps, slowly. My knees ached. My back protested. Yet I moved like someone who had earned every inch of ground beneath her. Paul opened the door before I could knock. He didn't smile, nor did I. Inside, the table was set for 3, just 3, without candles or guests. The plates were simple, the wine untouched, and it smelled of roasted chicken. Just food, not fancy. Lauren stood behind her chair, twisting a napkin. Paul gestured to mine. Please. I sat, and they followed. For a moment, we just breathed, enveloped by the silence that often precedes a verdict. Then Paul spoke. We wanted to say, thank you for coming. I nodded once. Lauren cleared her throat. We know we hurt you, and we know saying sorry doesn't fix everything. No, I replied, it doesn't. But we mean it, Paul added. And we're trying, we really are. I looked at him, noting the fine lines that had deepened since last time, the way his hands gripped the table's edge. He seemed like someone learning to sit with discomfort, which was new. I'm not here for apologies, I said. I've collected enough of those in my life to fill a library. They both tensed up slightly. I'm here, I continued, because I want to know if you see me now, not as a resource or background, but as a person, a woman, your mother. Paul swallowed. I think I'm beginning to. Lauren nodded, her eyes moist but calm. Me too. I believed her, not completely, but enough. We ate quietly for a while. The food was decent, the wine untouched. Before dessert, I stood up. I won't stay long, I said, but I will say this. I have changed and I won't revert. Paul looked up, his eyes weary. We don't expect you to. I nodded. Good, and turned to leave. At the door, I glanced back. You're not children anymore, and I'm not your safety net. I walked outside, down the steps, and into the night, where Emma was waiting, not asking what transpired, just opening the car door as if she already knew. We didn't talk in the car. Emma drove like she always did, cautiously, one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently in her lap. She didn't ask what they said. She didn't need to. The headlights swept past familiar homes, quiet lawns, and mailboxes adorned with birds. I watched them go by, one after another, and thought, this is the road I've always traveled, but now it feels different, because now I choose where it leads. Back home, I invited her in, not out of courtesy, but because I wanted real company. She made the tea this time, knowing where everything was. The kettle, the sugar tin, the chipped blue mugs. Her hands moved as if she belonged there, and perhaps now she did. We sat in the kitchen, and I said, I didn't shout, I didn't accuse, I just told the truth. Emma nodded. That's enough. I told them they won't get the old me back. She's gone. She had to leave, Emma whispered. I glanced at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a child, not as someone to shield, but as a reflection of all the women before me who were urged to remain silent, stay small, and be thankful. I think I was waiting, I said, for someone to notice my exhaustion, not in my body or joints, but in my role as mom, without being Mary. Emma leaned in, resting her elbows on the table. They noticed, she said, but they preferred it when you stayed quiet. Her words felt like a heavy stone in calm water, sharp, weighty, truthful. I allowed it, I admitted. I trained them really. Each time I said yes when I meant no. Each time I held my tongue instead of speaking. Each time I paid without question. Emma didn't interrupt. She understood this wasn't confession, but an unburdening. Somewhere along the way, I continued, I convinced myself that being useful was the same as being loved. She looked at me, not with pity or sadness, but with a kind of respect I hadn't experienced in years. You were loved, she said, but poorly. That struck me harder than expected. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull back. They've asked me to return, I said, to the table, to the old pattern, but gentler this time. I think they mean it. I'm just not sure if I do. Emma met my gaze steadily. You owe them nothing, but if you return, do it because you want to, not out of fear of not doing so. I nodded. It was never about the meal, not truly. It was about feeling invisible in a space I helped create. Almost to myself, I murmured, I won't remain quiet in a place where I must prove my existence. We finished our tea, no more words necessary. Emma stayed the night, not out of obligation, but out of choice. She slept in the guest room, and I left the hallway light on, as I did when Paul was young, not for comfort, but for witness. Morning arrived slowly and gently. Emma was still asleep when I awoke, and the house was enveloped in a rare tranquility. Not empty, not lonely, just filled with air that demanded nothing of me. I made breakfast for one. Toast, soft eggs, coffee. I didn't feel the absence. I didn't miss the noise or the roles I used to fill. Sitting at the kitchen table, in the same chair as always, I thought, this is peace. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't, but because I stopped pleading for attention from those who only noticed me when they needed something. After breakfast, I strolled through the garden. It was still early, and the dew clung to the grass. I checked the bird feeder and pruned a few dead stems. The lavender was gone, but something new was sprouting near the fence. I wasn't sure what it was yet, but I left it be. Some things deserve a chance to grow. Emma left around noon. She hugged me silently and said, before getting in the car, "You've changed everything, even if they don't realize it yet." I smiled, knowing they'd eventually feel it. After she drove off, I went to the living room drawer where I used to keep bills and receipts. I took out a clean sheet of paper and sat down with a pen. This wasn't a will or a ledger. It was a letter, not to Paul, Lauren, or even Emma, but to whoever needed it, to whoever had waited outside too long with something warm in their hands and hope in their heart. If you're reading this, you're not invisible to me. You don't need to keep proving yourself to people who only appear when they're empty and expect you to fill them. You don't have to bear the burden just because you always have. You don't need to label it love when it's truly obligation. You don't have to be the good one, the quiet one, the one who says it's okay when it's not. You have permission to stop, to change your mind, to seek peace over proximity. They might not understand. They might call it cruelty or paint you as the villain because they've lost access, not because they've lost you. Let them. You don't owe anyone your eraser. If you're standing outside someone's door with something you made with care and they don't open, leave it on the step and walk away. You were never just the pie. You were always more. If this letter resonates with you, put your signature below, not for others, but for yourself. Sign it with your silence, your refusal, and your first deep breath in years. If it helps you inhale more fully, leave a comment, share it, and pass it along. Let someone else know we're no longer waiting outside.